Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our third session of Building a Culture of Writing. We are pleased to welcome you this morning. This series is designed to build teachers' capacity for writing instruction. Before we start the live conversation, we invite you to start and continue the conversation on Twitter. Use hashtag Culture of Writing at Godot ELA to start the conversation. Today is the third K-5 session entitled Writing Genres. In this session, participants will explore structures, techniques, and conventions associated with narrative, informational, and argumentative writing. So without further delay, let's build a culture of writing as presenters Dr. Roberta Gardner and Rachel Gilmore shall share best practices for writing genres. And I will say before we get started that we are having just some slight difficulties this morning, so we will apologize in advance if you hear any typing sounds as the session is going. We've had to change our view for the webcam, and so it might cause there to be just a little noise when there's typing, when Cassandra is answering or taking your questions. But without further delay, we'll go ahead and hear from Dr. Roberta Gardner and Rachel Gilmore.
Hi everyone, I'm Rachel Gilmore. I am currently a third grade teacher with the Atlanta Public School District. I did my undergraduate studies at the University of Georgia, and I recently received my master's in early childhood education from the University of West Georgia. I'm real interested in home and school connections when it comes to writing. My writing was fostered at a young age with my mother, where I was very much encouraged to explore my writing and just be very innovative through it. And I will hope to do the same for my students. When I'm not working or teaching, I enjoy swimming, spending time with my family and friends, as well as traveling.
Great. And I'm Roberta Gardner. I teach reading and writing methods at Georgia State University. I spent 10 years as a media specialist and literacy support specialist in private as well as public school contexts. And my research and writing really focuses on the social and cultural aspects of writing and reading development. I believe that reading and writing the stories of our lives helps to create a world of new possibilities. And so today we're going to share some of those possibilities and some of what has taken place in Rachel's class, as well as in other schooling contexts that I have experienced. We believe that reading and writing widely across genres is really the entryway into writing. So providing its students with exposure to nonfiction, fiction books, poetry is an important way to expand their own writing practices. And one way to do that is through book tasting and musical chairs. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what happened in Rachel's classroom when she engaged in book tasting and musical chairs. As you can see, it does relate to the standards. And you can do this with children as young as kindergarten all the way up to college level. And it's actually something that I do with my pre-service teachers, because many times pre-service teachers haven't been exposed to children's literature that has been published recently. So this is a way to expose them to that by simply finding many different books. You can work with your media specialist, or you yourself can go on a book hunt and find a wide variety of genres and provide a structure for writing. Now, when you do book tasting, you basically are just doing that. You're allowing the kids to read the paratextual features, the front of the book, the back of the book, the inside flap, and maybe just like the first few lines of a text to see what they think, to assess the book. And so it's sort of a low stakes writing opportunity. And so can you talk a little bit about what happened in your class when you did it?
Yeah, so when we had book tasting in my classroom, we set up my desk in the shape of a U, and we had books of different genres around the classroom. The kids had a sheet where they can record what they thought about the book by each book. So we did 2 rounds, and they talked about whether or not they were interested in the book, some textual features that stood out to them, and they saw what other people wrote as well. So it kind of presented an argumentative writing piece, whether we like the book, we dislike the book, and it also provided an opportunity to form literature circles, and those literature circles led into writing. So just different writing groups.
Yeah, so it is really a great way to, provide exposure for kids, and it's fun too. Right. And adding the musical element is just like another layer of talking about genres of writing as well. Several years ago in 2009, Georgia Hurd and Jennifer McDonough published the book A Place for Wonder. Even though it was published so long ago, it continues to be a wonderful resource for informational and nonfiction writing. And the reason why it is because that notion of wonder really is something that gets kids writing. And what they found in terms of studies too is that nonfiction writing ends up often becoming sort of flat or falling flat, whereas when you look at narrative writing, it's more expressive. And so giving children an opportunity to wonder expands that. And over to the right, you can see a list there, and that actually was from session 1 when Kate Woodbridge and her students had brainstormed different genres of writing. And can you talk a little bit about what you've done in your class to expose kids to not only nonfiction writing and places of wonder or for wonder in your classroom, but just overall?
Well, in my class, my kids are very interested in genres that we don't actually explore a lot. So when we look at the list, we see things like joke books, and we see things like comic books, and you can use those means to write nonfiction. Use it to pull back everything in their interest and actually incorporate that nonfiction writing. So in my classroom, we do a lot of brainstorming about different ways we can bring our writing to life, as well as provide information with that nonfiction piece.
So a lot of pre-writing, a lot of exploratory writing. Again, in Georgia Hurd's book, you can see examples of using Post-its for the wonder of the week. So that interactive notion of writing together and having broad classroom context is something that's important. Now, here are some possibilities. As you look at different genres, leading kids to opportunities where they can engage in character sketches, body biographies. Again, these are low stakes writing opportunities that I think really get kids fired up about writing in ways that I don't know that they're even aware of quote unquote the labor, right? That can sometimes be associated with writing. And also found poems, and that was something that you and I talked about because you weren't quite familiar with it. But found poems is basically when there is an existing piece of writing that already exists, and students can block out a poem, isolating certain words and creating a new piece of writing from that. So those thought processes are really rich, and I think it's something you're going to try down the line.
Yes, absolutely. Another way we do this is the raft, and I don't know if you're not aware with the raft. It stands for role, audience, format, and topic. So it's just really giving students a different voice and helping with their creativity and different perspectives and helping to write to different audiences. So it can be a during, pre, or after writing activity, and it just helps them make that connection with what they're writing and who they're writing to, and just put it in a different way where it's fun. If you're pretending like you're a different role, it always engages the students.
Sure. I think we're going to talk specifically about some of the strategies you've used and some of the ways that you can integrate technology into, again, we're sort of beginning our conversation here with low stakes writing. And so can you share what you've done with EduBlogs in your classroom?
Right. In my classroom, we use blogs, and it just helps bring collaboration among the students, student-to-student collaboration, student-to-teacher collaboration, small group collaboration, those discussions. Every week, I post a discussion question on our blog, and students are given their username and password to go in, and they have a rubric to respond to each other, to respond to me. So it just really, really fosters that communication, that collaboration, staying on topic, piggybacking off of each other. If you don't agree, if you do agree. So it just fosters that healthy collaboration among topics.
Yeah, and a social process. So here's an example of you posted a question about Roberto Clemente. You provided some information, and then off to the right, there's the student dialogue there, right?
Right. So Roberto Clemente was a baseball player, and students were able to make text-to-text connections with him and Jackie Robinson, and then they made text-to-self connections. Well, he was a hero because he went back to his country and gave back, so they were able to write down, well, I give back to the people in my neighborhood. So making those connections, and also just it not being so structured helps them feel like they can just write whatever they want to, and they enjoy seeing each other's comments and who commented back to their posts. So that is a really, really good way in my classroom that we foster those collaborative discussions.
They love being on the computer,
They
right?
do.
I use Today's Meet, not only with my students, and for those who aren't familiar with Today's Meet is a version, it's much like Twitter, but what's nice about it is that students don't have to have an account that is exposed to everyone. Teachers can create their Today's Meet that is centered around a question. It could be used for pre-writing. It can be open for a month, for a week, for a day. I use it with my, university level pre-service teachers to engage in conversations and debates. And so these are sort of small ways to engage in conversations using technology as a way to move into writing and the writing process. Now, we know that narrative writing is one of the spaces where teachers start off the school year, inviting students to create their narratives, tell stories of their lives. When we started this series, we talked about how kids come to school with stories to tell. And indeed they do, and narrative writing is one of those entry points. Tell us a little bit about what happens with narrative in your classroom and how you might use books and mentor texts to expose them to great writing.
Okay, well, in narrative writing in my classroom, especially when I taught the lower grades, I always like to start off with a picture. And this picture really brings back the importance of visualization when you're writing. Because when you visualize things, you pull out the emotion that you want to evoke. You pull out different adjectives that you want to use. So during the pre-writing stage with our narrative, we always write a picture, draw a picture initially, and then label what's going on in the picture to tell the story that we want to tell. So they pull that from their picture, they pull their pre-writing, fill out their graphic organizers, just talk about the beginning, the middle, the end. So narrative writing is something that definitely comes easier to my students.
Sure.
Seeing the big picture.
Yeah. I think kids have been exposed to narrative writing through orality, through storytelling, in their families, but also with books. So, for example, in Cynthia Ryland's wonderful book, The Relatives Came, pulling out those great examples. So the example we have here is from that text, and it says, it was different with all that new breathing in the house. And so that example is a fine, part of a narrative that provides visualization, and you can see why reading aloud serves as a really important scaffolding to help students to improve their own writing, right? And so I know the other thing as it relates to visualization is when we talk about our youngest writers, right, our kindergarten writers, that's where we want them to start, with imagery, and then creating, sentences that match that imagery, right?
Right.
So, and that's a way that we assess them. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah. So visualization is very important, like you said. When we talk about writing and writing with detail, when kids are able to see the picture and then pull that detail from the picture, it helps it come easily and naturally for the students. Students, like you said, students love to tell stories. So it's so powerful when they can have their stories at a young age in kindergarten, able to, even if they're not the strongest writers, able to have that picture tell the story, first of all, and then pull from that picture to construct their sentences. And that's the foundation, that's the building blocks right there, just able to get your ideas down on paper without feeling so pressured.
Right. Yeah, the empty page can be nerve-wracking, I think, for all of us, right? And I think also one of the important strategies when teaching writing is elaboration, right? And so that's why visuals are so important, because they can be used to pull more information from kids so that they can then put that down on the paper and then move on to lengthier writing, right, through paragraph writing and telling rich stories. Now, certainly narrative writing often opens the door to kids' lived experiences. And I know many of you are aware of Margaret Weiss Brown's just really important book, Good Night Moon, right? Everybody knows that. That's one of the first books that we introduced many young children to. But not many people know about her book, The Dead Bird, okay? And it was a book that she came out with many years ago, and as you can see on the left, it has been reissued with a updated version, new imagery, and I wanted to bring this out and share this because for a couple of reasons. One, we know kids really enjoy writing about their lived experience, and especially something like a dead bird, right? Like, we've encountered that. And that's a context that they'd want to share. But also, the other thing that is really important here and useful in terms of writing is you can really get into comparative writing and comparing old versions of stories and new versions of stories in this way. This strategy can also be used with folk tales and fairy tales, sharing different versions and writing, comparative analysis of those stories as well. I know your kids love writing about their lived experiences and sometimes risque topics.
They do. We have a lot of discussion within my class, and especially during our shared circle time. And that is where the students get a lot of their ideas of what they want to write about. Just different things that happen to them that they want to share to the class that they're anxious to share. So it's definitely a perfect way just to put it on paper and then write it down and share it in that form.
Yeah, and I know your students also use journals, right? They use journals, so sometimes things that they want to write or you want to encourage them to write in their journals may not end up fully published, but they still get to write those things out, right? Can you tell us a little bit about the strategy of moving from watermelon to slice to seed stories? Because we know that kids often will write those great big huge watermelon stories, right? But we know when they get to the tiny details, that's when we really start to feel the writing. Talk a little bit about how you moved your kids through that.
So in narrative writing, kids tend to just want to spit out all the things that happen to them within the story, but not focusing on specific details that, like you said, make the story come to life. So when we talk about watermelon and slice and seeds, so the watermelon is the big story, the big picture, and then we take a slice of that story and then we go even deeper and take a seed of that story and focus on that. So I know I had to teach this skill explicitly to my kids. So we started off with little cut and paste activities where you had different topics, and some of the topics were watermelon, some of them were slice, and some of them were seed. So for example, one of the big watermelon topics were McDonald's. My kids love McDonald's. So then the slice of that was, well, we went to McDonald's, we got a Happy Meal. And then we focused on the seed. Well, the seed is, I had this really amazing toy that I got in my Happy Meal bag. So when they focus on that seed, they bring out all these different details. So at the bottom left-hand side of the screen, you will see an example of one of my students writing. Start off with a graphic organizer. She was talking about her family trip to Washington, D.C. And she did lots of amazing things. She went to go see different monuments. She had a long 9-hour ride in the car, and then she went to this fancy restaurant. So she was able to articulate and write down all of her seed stories within the watermelon. But then she chose to focus on all the monuments that she went to go see. And when she focused on that one seed story, everything came to life. We had more details, more descriptive words, more specific events that took place. So with me modeling that and then them practicing that and collaborating with their peers and their peers saying, well, tell me more about this specific thing, and talking through it, it really helps those details come out on paper.
Yeah, and I've read it, and her voice really did come out in that piece. And I know helping kids to get the words and lift the words off the page can be difficult, and it may take some explicit modeling, right, to do that.
Lots of practice.
It also is a fine opportunity, moving from watermelon and slice and seed stories, to move students through voice tagging. I know online there are lots and lots of different ways to talk about said is dead. That's really popular. But creating T-charts and having explicit lessons that you do in your mini lesson workshop that really helps them to have that language that flourishes and lives and helps the reader to visualize is really important. And so this is an example of a voice tag lesson that students were moved through in a 4th grade classroom. And as you can see, the word on the left, three sides up, disappointed, becomes bummed. Okay, and so here you can see vocabulary being taught within the course of their writing and helping words to fly.
Vocabulary acquisition is very important. Just, you know, knowing different words to use and using those context clues to figure out what different words mean. I know my students really enjoy when I even vocalize different words to them that they don't know what they mean, and say, use your context clues. And then I see that those different words in their writing. So just making sure that that's used in our talk as well is very important.
Yeah, exactly. And this student, you know, explicitly narrates it at the bottom. Voice tags are important in helping us figure out how the character is talking. So again, having those lessons on character traits, but then moving into voice tagging through dialogue and all of that is a wonderful process. Response to literature is really a big genre, and there are lots and lots of ways that I know you've done that. There are ways to get into this with different disciplinary areas. So for example, what you're seeing an image of right here is a graffiti table where kids in a guided reading group who are working on social studies are providing key points and main ideas from a particular reading. So again, this is a different kind of response to literature that's in a disciplinary area, but still a very important strategy for writing across the curriculum, right, and multiple genres. What kinds of things have you done in terms of collaborative construction?
In my class, we do a lot of museum walks where if we read an anchor text, I will post different questions around the room, and they're responsible for replying to those questions, but not only what they think, which is fine, you can put what you think, but having evidence from the text to support what you think. And it also is a way for kids to collaborate on their thoughts, those healthy arguments and discussions. Well, I agree, I disagree, but write it down and give reasons why. So museum walks are one way that we do that. We also do a lot of bubble maps, which helps the kids make connections between themselves and their reading and their writing, or themselves in another topic. So just those connections are really important because it makes the students feel more comfortable with their writing and with what they're articulating.
Absolutely. And I think another important thing to bring up here, in research, what has also been found in terms of response to literature and issues of culture and difference are the disconnections that kids make too. Really finding opportunities for students to write out and share and talk through their disconnections, because we know that we live in a multicultural society and kids are coming to school with different diverse perspectives. And this is an opportunity, by really foregrounding disconnections, for them to write through and talk about that. And so we know we've shared a lot of information so far, and so we want to pause, and we'd like you to think a bit and go ahead and tweet us at #Culture of Writing at GADOEELA, and talk about what you noticed and what more you'd like from us, and if you have any questions. Okay.
We notice there are no questions in the chat feature right now, so we're going to give you just a few more moments to put your thoughts to tweets. Are you checking? We'll look and see possibly if you are chatting us up. We don't want there to be too much dead air, so I'll give you maybe 30 more seconds.
And throughout, we can certainly come back to this. You can tweet throughout, and we can, pause, and we'll keep checking to see if you have questions. But we'll continue on very shortly.
And feel free to turn and talk to a partner maybe and share your ideas about what you've noticed. But if you do have questions for our presenters, we welcome them.
The tweets aren't loading right now.
So let's move on to have a conversation about informational writing. We've talked about narrative writing. We've talked about low-stakes writing and the role of technology in that, pre-writing, and that kind of thing. As it relates to informational writing, we know that standards-based education, as well as Common Core, really foregrounds informational writing. And it is important because we read more informational writing than we do anything else. And so helping kids to be strong writers when they're talking about factual things is important. You want to point out a few things?
Yeah, so with informational writing, it's important to that your reader or the student's reader is able to identify the major concepts. And a lot of times when we think of informational writing, or even when the students think of informational writing, they think of this one mundane text structure. And it's very important to expose your kids to different forms of informational writing and recognize all the unlimited possibilities of informational writing and how fun it actually could be giving your audience information in different formats.
Absolutely. That's very true. And that's why, early on in session 1, Kate Woodbridge and I talked about writers on writing, and integrating writers on writing into the structure of your writing workshop. And again, for those who weren't able to view session 1 or listen to the podcast of it, it is when you invite, quote unquote, an author or an illustrator into your classroom through an illustrator and author study, visiting their website, their blogs, flooding your classroom with their books. And one very important author and illustrator to introduce students to as it relates to informational writing is Steve Jenkins. He's got a really nice body of work. I think he taps into what you mentioned in terms of breaking that mode of a stale structure for informational writing. So, for example, in the book Living Color, he categorizes the animals by color, okay, and exposes really rich details and information about the animals in this way. Actual size, as you can see, the taxonomy that he creates is by size, and divulges information in this way. And so exposing your kids to an author like this in a different text structure and identifying text features, is a rich way for hopefully you to see it spill over into their writing.
Right. In my classroom, we actually did a text feature study where kids were able to pull out different text features and really focus in on the ones that kind of just caught their attention. So it's amazing how kids can write through the text features. Informational does not necessarily have to be long paragraphs of information, but just get those main points across. And what a fun way to do it with different text features.
Yeah, they do enjoy that. And I think, again, it goes back to this notion that when you expose them to that, they're not as afraid of the blank page, right? They see writing as fun, they see it as approachable, and that's a really important thing. I know that there's some really important things to also highlight within the context of your curriculum as it relates to informational writing. Like you mentioned, specific text patterns and forms of organization, exposing them to cause and effect. And even different approaches to creating books, like cookbooks and things like that, right?
How-to books, cookbooks, books that your expertise on. So kids love being experts on things. So just different forms of, like you said, giving that informational text.
Yeah, and also the importance that really with informational writing, we know that if we look at those texts, it's not a beginning to end kind of thing, right? It's really about, hey, which information is most important? I also like talking about, when we talk about informational text, I also like talking about the diffusion that can occur, and this idea that you can mix literary and informational text together. And what you're seeing now are some examples of wonderful texts where that actually occurs. I talked about WOW before, and another WOW for informational writing, but specifically informational writing that explores and the intersection of literary and informational text would be Douglas Florian. He actually is a poet, but what he does is he takes poetic license, if you will. If you look at that book encyclopedia, we know that there's no such word, right? But we also know what he's getting at there. Same thing with memorabilia. But what he does in those books is he takes really factual information about insects, right? And integrates really creative writing styles. So, for example, there is a poem about a butterfly. And he says she eats 8 leaves at least to fill her, which leaves her like a caterpillar. No word, right? But we get it. Then she checks inside of a pupa and comes out Madam Butterfly. How super, right? Yeah. So really short but informational. And you start to see that come to life in kids writing the more you expose them to text like that.
And you also see the critical thinking within it when stuff is not right in your face, but you really have to just really read the text critically, and in turn students will start to write critically, saying, oh, I'm going to put this information in a different way. So those anchor texts, again, are very important. The more anchor text you expose your students to, the more vast writing they will give you.
It's so true. It's so true. And many studies, empirical studies, have shown that. You see a few other examples, like The Title and Egg is Quiet. That's almost a series now of informational writing. And again, you see a creative approach. One of the articles that I recommend for educators is an article by Nancy Lilly. and it's called Dead or Alive. How will your students' nonfiction arrive? I think you're going to receive a copy of that article. And so what you're seeing at the bottom there is an example of how she moves students from this sort of drab, unfun kind of informational writing that they think they should do, and how to actually move them. So you can see at the bottom that stuff, if you will, and then what stuff does. Okay, so you take an animal and collectively you can engage in the conversation about moving. They don't just run, okay, they leap, they pounce, right? And again, that's where you get to the visualization. Can you read that part at the top beginning with turtles?
Yes, turtles poured out of the surf in wave after wave through the darkness, heaving, huffing, gasping. Turtles plowed the coarse black sand with their noses, laboring onto the shore.
And that beautiful piece of writing is an excerpt from National Geographic. Now, National Geographic is known for their amazing photographs, right? Not so much their writing, but there's beautiful writing in there that's vivid. And so finding short excerpts and sharing those excerpts with young readers and writers is another great way to expose them to really rich writing, vivid examples of nonfiction writing that, yes, flies off the page and gives us really, really strong context. So this idea of focusing on what your audience needs with nonfiction writing is just really important. Again, we know that it doesn't flow from beginning to end. It's like, what is the most important information, right? And this is an example of a poster that was created, not at Rachel's school, but another school that I frequent over the course of the semester. And that poster was about Austria. And as you can see, this student really had the opportunity to take what they knew about posters, right? Playing with the text, playing with the textual features, the way it curves, highlighting imagery, right? As a way to inform, right? And so we know that these are the important factors about nonfiction and informational writing.
Right, and it also shows that they really know the concept of having the main idea and then those key supporting details and in a different format other than paragraph form.
Right, exactly. So it is a way to scaffold, you know, your writers and move them into more substantive writing. Absolutely. Another factor that's really important as it relates to reading and writing, and I brought this up a little bit earlier, is culturally relevant opportunities for reading and writing. And you've done a lot of that in your classroom. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, culturally relevant opportunities are very, very important with my students because it really gives them that connection to writing that we keep talking about, that ownership and that expertise. So when we bring in things that are important to them, important to the community, important to your family, just important to things that are going on, things that are relevant now to the students, you'll bring a whole different layer of writing and different details and different perspectives that you wouldn't get with the ordinary writing prompts, giving them that choice just as long as they meet the certain standard that's given, but just giving them that choice of what they want to write on, the writing will be brought to life in a whole different level.
Yeah, Ralph Fletcher really drives home that idea of choice equals voice, right? And also voice comes into being through culturally relevant opportunities. And so really asking yourself constantly, how does the writing in your classroom connect to the lives of your students is an important factor as you assess, you know, the level of enthusiasm and interest in writing, and it's something that shouldn't be forgotten, but could easily be. And here's an example of how that came to life in your classroom and how the standards measured up to that.
Right. So in my classroom, we were doing informative writing, and instead of just giving them the traditional approach where, you know, you give a prompt and they reply to it, a particular student did a drawing. And his drawing was about how I want to help the homeless people. That was something that was relevant to him because in his neighborhood, he saw a lot of homeless people and he saw a need to help them. So we drew from his drawing and started the writing with the graphic organizer. So his main idea was I want to help the homeless, and he drew, well, they need food, they need clothes, they need shelter, money, and from there he started his writing. So a lot of times writing is perceived to start with a prompt, and that might not always be the case. I didn't plan to teach him the writing this way, but it kind of unfolded that way, and it was something that was very important to him. Also going through the writing process. So he was able to pre-write. We were able to conference with each other. And then my kids love getting on the computer and typing up their writing. So he was able to go through the whole writing process and something that was relevant to him. And he's actually going to put it in his published book. So that will be the last phase of this piece of writing. But as you see, it hits all the standards that as teachers we need to hit. We did the informative writing, we did the guidance and support, the planning, revising, editing, and then that publishing piece with the technology. And it's something that he was motivated to do because that's what was interesting to him and what he cared about.
Absolutely. And really, I think, again, a fusion of informational and personal and narrative writing. Here's another example of something I was actually able to be a part of in your classroom where we used images, right, and photography, and the kids moved from looking at the images to actually writing pieces. And can you write what the 3 students in your classroom wrote, the poem?
Okay, well, they were given an image of a little girl getting her hair done, and they were asked to think critically and really tell what they think is going on, give their own personal information about what's going on in this picture in the genre of poetry. So they entitled their poem Black Curly Nice. They said, my hair is curly and nice, my hair is curly and nice. I put a bow on it so it can stay nice. My hair is curly and black. My hair is curly and black. My mama ties it up each and every night. My hair is curly and natural. My hair is curly and natural. I love my hair because it is curly, natural, and black. And without prompts, my kids really brought the picture to life. They told the information about the picture. They use alliteration and repetition and things that they were taught and hit the standards that were asked of them in their own creative way.
Absolutely. And so again, you can see where they had a really strong cultural connection. They tied in and they really got into it. They really had a strong connection to this poem. So one of the things that we've done is to engage in reading and writing with images, because again, and we keep on driving home this idea of visualization and the use of pictures, because again, in K-5 settings, this remains a motivating context. And I would argue too, beyond that. I'd certainly see that with my pre-service teachers. And what you're seeing now is an example of visual thinking strategies, questioning prompts that Philip Yonaway developed as it relates to reading images in museum settings. But in some of my research and work, as I look at social cultural connections, I've tied it into that, and we've used that in Rachel's classroom. And so some of these questions, what's going on in this picture, what do you see that makes you say that, and what else can you find, have served as ways to move into writing in rich ways that don't always match up with what was written in the text, right? But it gives them an opportunity for them to have connections and disconnections.
And a lot of times, I know I've had authors and illustrators within my classroom, they're always interested in the perspective of the students before they give them their own perspective. So like I said, it goes back to that critical thinking piece. Like a picture can have many different stories, and it's important for the students to have the opportunity to write down their personal information or story that they think the picture portrays.
Absolutely. And so this is definitely a way for culturally relevant teaching to sort of come into being authentically by simply providing images instead of a prompt, right? Because in that way, kids are bringing who they are and their own perspectives to the conversation, right? So here's an example too of an image from Shadra Strickland's book, which is called White Water. And you can see you can integrate historical fiction and address social studies standards, right? And the image itself is really powerful, right? For kids to engage in response to literature and prompts and really key in on certain things. And you can really actually do a little bit of backwards curriculum work here and going back to the watermelon seed and slice stories just by looking at images and writing through and having kids talk about, make really strong critical thinking connections by saying, what do you think the watermelon story is here, right? So basically, we've expanded it, right? Through your classroom and working in your classroom, this idea that we can use photography, figure drawing, image-based poetry writing, and I think your kids have liked it, right?
They definitely have liked it, and it's definitely a way for me to keep that cross-curricular practices going, where writing is seen throughout all subjects, and it makes it easier for the kids if they know they have that comfortable space where they can write in social studies, science, reading, everything, and it just makes it come naturally for them with doing it that way. And like you said, with the pictures, it's easy to connect, you know, your social studies with the writing, your science with the writing, just by starting with that imagery.
That's right, yeah. And also, definitely, we know that there are visual literacy standards now that we can address through these kinds of approaches. And one thing that we don't want to forget is the opportunity for kids to develop strong identities as readers and writers, and to feel good about who they are when they get that blank page in front of them. And one of the ways that we've, you know, explored this in your classes through portrait making and you know, giving them an opportunity to write acrostic poems. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Right. So we did a portrait unit of study in my classroom, and as you can see, the students were able to draw a portrait of themselves and kind of zoom in on specific parts of them that they deem important. Clearly, my student doesn't have blue hair, but she thought that was important, her creativity, to have her blue hair and her eyes facing a certain way. She thinks she's very curious and sometimes a little nosy. So just having those attributes shown on their picture, how they perceive themselves, and then we tied that into the acrostic poem. So her poem she was really helpful, always nice, keeps clean, she's into loving, she's a young lady, and my mama's baby. So I really think, well, I know that the portrait of herself really drove her writing and really gave her a voice as a writer.
Absolutely. And here's another example of, you know, having painted words, if you will. We had introduced them to Jacob Lawrence, right? We exposed them to different artists who ended up, you know, having African American heritage, and they really connected, and you can see what they've learned and what they experimented come to life again on that page. You want to talk a little bit about this student?
This student, he definitely loves drawing more than writing, but you can see the effect that the mentor text, or the mentor pictures in this case, and text, had on him in his drawing. We didn't have his writing sample that went with this, but it just really evokes some strong imagery, and it helps evoke his voice to come off the paper just by looking at him and just looking at the features of his face, and just really having a discussion of why did you draw yourself like this, and then turning that discussion into his writing.
Yes, absolutely. It has been a powerful scaffold.
It has.
For sure. We know, too, that kids love graphic novels, right? They're not, thankfully, as risque or taboo as they used to be. And again, kids' voices really come to life Tell us about the creation of this one.
So in my classroom, this particular piece, we were working on imagery and more specifically dialogue. So this student decided to make a cartoon. A lot of my boys are into superheroes and things like that. So the name of his cartoon was Secret Agent Dog, and he really focused on voice and dialogue within the speech bubbles. So it was just a really fun way to practice what he was learning as far as dialogue and writing that narrative to give that real/imagined experience using that technique, having that sequence. And it's very, very clear with the different boxes and just the things that the different characters were saying, him and his dog. So it's really direct, explicit dialogue that was used to make this cartoon.
Yeah, I like that the dog is a secret agent too. Like, so that's
Right.
really creative, and he's saying that I'm a secret agent.
Right.
But you can see that again, it does apply to standards, and so giving students lateral and leeway to create in the way that they see fit will open up really, really rich opportunities and possibilities. Again, through image study, it served as a scaffold, right, in your classroom to move on to writing. So you could see in Rachel's class, we studied Gordon Parks. We read images and photography, and you can see some of the dialogue. They said, she looks so sad. And you can see again where they're kind of getting into the argumentative phase. Well, she doesn't look sad to me. Said I feel like she's really mad at somebody, right?
Right. And also giving the kids the opportunity to bring in their own images. I know we sent home disposable cameras one day, and the kids were able to bring back their pictures. Now, we got some good pictures and some not so good pictures, but the ones that were good, we had children take pictures of their communities, and children take pictures of their family and certain objects that are important to them, and really having discussion based off their imagery, their personal imagery. And like you said, bringing in that argumentative piece with that. Well, I think my neighborhood is this. Well, no, I don't think it's like that. Well, why do you think it's like that?
Yes.
And having that component within their writing is really powerful.
Yeah. Absolutely. And object writing and artifact writing is important too. That's another strategy that ties into what's important to kids and their interests. You can see, we talked about just previously how through discussion they moved into argumentative conversations, and that ended up spilling over into writing. Can you walk us through this particular piece and what was happening? I see not a red pen, but a green pen. What's happening here?
Okay, so this particular student is writing an opinion piece of why they think that toys are good to play with. It actually stemmed from him bringing toys in my classroom, and he was going to convince me why he needed these toys to play with. So he actually did a graphic organizer previous to this, and then he did his rough draft on the computer, and we printed it out. The green is actually his peer conference that he had with one of his peers, just looking for spelling errors and sentence structure, things like that. And the gray is when I piggybacked and came in and had that discussion with him about what was strong and not strong about his essay, the good, the bad, his weaknesses, his strengths, and after which he retyped his essay on the computer and came up with his final draft. And he definitely hit all the standards to introduce the topic and give the reasons that support his opinions, and then close out his topic again. And that was something that was stemmed from him having this argument with me about toys. So it was a good teachable moment for him.
Yeah, and definitely, again, the research shows that authentic writing opportunities is a motivating context for young writers.
And also, he is not really a strong writer, but you couldn't tell by this piece. I found that kids typing on the computer, they like doing that a little bit better than writing, because they don't feel the pressure of everything having to be spelled correctly, because sometimes it just pops up for you. But it just really gave him that safe place to get all his ideas down and his argument down on paper without having to really have to think about, well, how do I spell this and does this look right? He just really felt comfortable on that computer. So this is a emergent writer, and you really couldn't tell just based off of his product.
Sure. And I like the idea of moving from peer conferencing to conferencing with you. So it definitely is a social process and collaborative process. Something else that we're starting to experiment in your classroom is using different kinds of text, right, for argumentative writing, which includes protest signs, right? Talk a little bit about why we're doing this approach and you know, your thoughts about how it ties into scaffolding their writing, particularly in relationship to argumentative and persuasive writing.
Okay, well, as you know, there's a lot of things going on in the world today, and our kids are not naive of the facts that are going on. They sometimes come in with more information than what you know, and they have different perspectives about what's going on and how that's going to affect them. So with these posters, they're able to get their main point across and really articulate that to their audience. And it's opinion argumentative writing in its greatest form, because you're getting the main idea right there. And starting off with these posters, or starting off with different things, pictures and posters and things like that, they're able to bring back their argument and give the main points and persuade their audience why they should be on my side and not your side. And it's just a fun way for kids to just protest against different things and bring their awareness into their writing.
Yeah, absolutely. Civic education matters, right? And so this is, again, another cross-curricular way of doing this. And again, it's motivating. They want to do these protest signs, right? And also, again, as you mentioned, teaching pros and cons. I think another, this is an example, this particular poster is an example. Again, I mentioned I'm in other schools throughout the course of the semester, and thinking about authentic writing. This is a poster that is in a school. It says, donate your old shoes to people who are less fortunate than you. Again, this is writing, and this is persuasive writing, and really highlighting that, identifying that is another example of low stakes writing that can be used to create something a little more substantive. This here is another example. Again, same school in the center, and on the left, Girls on the Run Want You. So they use the students, you know, to create this environmental text. And it's really important to think about that in your classroom, in your school. The picture on the left is a huge thank you card, if you will, that was created for a teacher in that school. All of this counts in terms of genre writing, right?
And it really keys into the intrinsic motivation that you want your students to have as writers. So just starting at these low-stake writings just really helps them build themselves and their confidence as writers.
Yeah, and the picture on the right is actually from your classroom, right?
So my kids have writing journals. I think we mentioned this previously, but they're able to just create their safe place for writing within their writing journals, knowing that they can just put all their ideas in the journals, and whether it's published or not, it was still a space for them to write what's on their mind, or write what they think people should feel, or write what they want to give information on at that particular time. So just giving that space for them to just not feel so pressured about, I'm always writing for my teacher, or writing for this. I'm writing for myself. So that's very important.
Yeah, and they experiment with genres within that space, right?
And a lot of time as a teacher, you can flip back and draw from that and just help them build.
Yeah, absolutely, because I know your students, I look through them, they have heart maps in there, they have list writing, which serves as a space to, again, go back and build from when they tell you that
they have nothing to write
about. That's right, that's right. Something else that I've recently been involved with that's really powerful, and that we've also done in your classroom, is bookmaking. And so regardless of the genre, regardless of the topic, bookmaking is a space where kids really can own the writing, and learning with their hands, if you will, is really a powerful space. One of my favorite books, and I mentioned it before early on, is a book called About the Authors. And in that book, it really includes bookmaking with the youngest writers. So Katie Wood Ray starts with kindergarten kids already making their own books, and they have a context for this. And they're definitely motivated because they'll say, I'm making a book, as opposed to I'm writing on a sheet of paper to turn in. You know,
and
it's very different.
Definitely love having that finished product.
Yes.
And another good idea is to have in your library within your classroom or your book corner or whatever you have, to have a space for the kids to have their published books, so that visitors or their classmates or whoever comes in the room can read their writing, and they have that sense of pride with their writing. So
they're very proud of that.
A real simple way that you can make a book is just with a piece of construction paper and some copying paper in the middle, punch holes, and use a pencil as the binder, and have a rubber band go through the holes. But this is, my kids love making their little books, and they're not allowed to do this until they really go through their writing process. So it's just really that motivation, like, oh, I want to have a book on the bookshelf, and they really love their bookmaking.
Absolutely. And there are different kinds of approaches. Accordion folds, that's an easy way. And also something that we talked about, again, briefly in session 1 was simply having cards. Allowing kids to create cards. Again, that's an authentic context. Hey, it's my grandmother's birthday, or I want to, write a Goodwill card to my dad. He just had surgery. So again, these are authentic contexts that are motivating for students. And so the book, again, is another way.
And so, like I said, you can use this with all the genres of writing.
Yes.
So if you want it to be persuasive or informational or having a narrative, but just as long as they're able to publish. So again, we just folded a piece of construction paper in half, and you can put whatever kind of paper you want in the middle, and just put 2 holes on the side and use a pencil as the binder. And you just feed the rubber band through the holes and connect it to the pencil, and it just serves as their published book. So it's just a real cheap and creative way that all your kids are going to be able to be publishers.
Yes. And so, again, we've flooded you with a lot of information, but we want to keep it simple. We hope you carry away, here are 5 things that we hope that you carry away, and more. But I'll start off with the first one, and it's really just increasing access and exposure to a variety of genres and formats. There's so many wonderful books out here.
Yes.
Award-winning books, Orbis Pictus books, which are the nonfiction award-winning books, Coretta Scott King, award-winning books, Caldecott award-winning picture books. There are so many options, poetry, and again, different formats and artifacts.
The second thing, we want you to increase your instructional time and balance direct instruction with student choice and voice. So I know we spoke about that a lot throughout this presentation, but just making sure your kids have voice and choice, and seeing how easily that can align with the standards.
Absolutely. And then also providing common as well as unique opportunities for writing, because, again, it's a social process. So bringing the universal in with the individual is a really important approach to writing and building a community of writers.
Building on prior knowledge and creating that enthusiasm for your students by using those culturally relevant texts that really just bring it back to them and keep that connection, and having that authentic purpose. Like, I'm writing this text to tell a story. I'm writing this text to get you on my side. I'm writing this text to give you this piece of information.
Yes.
So just making sure that they know their audience and they know their purpose, and they're just relating that back to themselves.
Absolutely. And certainly, last but not least, the importance of who you are as a writer and a reader, right? And sharing your own interests throughout will really get your students motivated, thinking about your habits, sharing your habits as a writer and as a reader will help them to also, share their own and to be less afraid.
Right.
And
a lot of times as teachers, you have to think of yourself also as an anchor text. Like I am an anchor text.
Right.
So if I come in and I have something going on with myself, share that with your students and put it in writing, and they will indeed do the same.
Yeah. So that's all we have for you today. We hope you have some strategies that you learned from us, and feel free to send us an email or look us up on Twitter. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We do have a few questions from our participants,
Okay.
and we have a question about the graffiti table. They're wondering, do students have to write in complete sentences, or can they just jot down their ideas?
It always will depend on the curricular purpose. So sometimes creating lists and bulleted points might suffice, and other times making sure that, hey, I need these. I hear you all the time say, I need these to be third grade sentences.
Right. And one thing that I use it for is annotating the text, like putting the page number that you found this, and even if it's not a complete sentence, like just supporting, your writing. I think that's, especially now me teaching third grade, that's a big push, like support your opinion, support your writing. So I think it can be used in any way that just suits your instructional purpose for the time.
And the second part to that question, do they expand on every idea that's listed on the table? You encourage them to do that?
So there are a couple ways of doing it that I've included this with free service teachers as a teaching method. So sometimes you might divide it by group, and that group has a specific purpose that they're pulling out and a need, but other times, how have you used it?
Sometimes I've used it as a rough draft just for their writing. So instead of having that graphic organizer, this is, a place to just put all your thoughts.
Okay.
So I've used it in that way.
Almost a data dump.
Right.
Gotcha.
We have a few more. Can you talk a little bit about how you implement journaling in your classroom?
Journaling. Okay. Well, sometimes I have journal topics and other times I don't. Just like is the big push for independent reading, I feel like students should also have independent writing time, just time just to just put down all their thoughts. So sometimes might have a topic, other times it's just whatever's on your mind, but I definitely utilize that within their writing journals, just as a safe place. Sometimes I even use journaling as like a closing to my lesson, whether it be math, reading, whatever, just journal down your thoughts, your questions. So it can be just used in different ways in my classroom.
One book that I would recommend, I think I talked about it before, is Notebook Know-How. And there are multiple strategies in there for K, actually through 12th grade. And it's written by a Georgia educator, and her name escapes me right now, but I highly recommend that for a variety of ways of using journals.
Right, and also when you use journals, you just don't want to limit it to complete writing sentences. I feel like personally, so just going back to that imagery, maybe draw a picture, or maybe just give me a 3-2-1 or something like that. So it's important to talk about different journal strategies with your kids, because sometimes if you just give your kid a piece of paper and say, okay, here, journal, they're really going to go blank. But if they see those different formats that they can journal, it helps evoke all the knowledge that they have in their head. So, yeah.
And then we have a question. They're wondering what's the best way to begin preparing our younger students, particularly our K2 students, for writing assessments.
Wow. So I would say first exposure to a variety of texts, everything from Eric Carle to Mo Willems, to really start off in that way, so that they hear the patterns of writing, and because we write based on what we hear too. And so exposure and reading aloud is really sort of a scaffold and a move towards writing, but also modeling is really, really important. So having a time every day where you model writing is just a really important part of writing instruction practice. Not expecting them to attack the blank page if they don't see you attack the blank page.
And I know in kindergarten, a lot of times we do a lot of thematic studies, and just responding to that literature that you're presenting within your unit is just a very good way to, you can do that whole group, just like you said, the modeling and just the exposure to respond to that text, whatever it be, informational, literary, whatever genre that you're doing. It's
Absolutely.
a great way.
Yeah, I think so. Interactive writing or sharing the pen is also another important way to scaffold with young writers, where you are writing the story together and co-writing and modeling how to move from an image to actual sentence creation is another way. During circle time, that's another, doing daily oral language, things like that, help teachers to integrate it into their practices in the ELA block.
Okay, we have no more questions at this time, and we thank our presenters. At this time, our colleague, Didi Bunn, will come and talk about Universal Design for Learning Principles.
Good morning. I like to talk about Universal Design for Learning with bringing out the specific things that were talked about during this webinar. I think a lot of times we look at Universal Design for Learning and feel like it's just overwhelming. There's just too much to do. But in listening to these two ladies today, there was so much that they had in here that we can apply to UDL. When we think about UDL, we want to present multiple ways to engage our students, to motivate our students to write, multiple ways that we can represent the material that we're asking them to write about and the forms and genres of writing, and then multiple ways that they can actually write. And throughout this, there was just rich, rich material in here. I love the book tasting and the musical choices. I was thinking about how many kids could be engaged by that they're going to go in and make their own choices. It's going to increase their motivation. They're going to see what other kids are choosing. It's just a wonderful way to engage. Talking about the purpose of writing, I think that's a really important engagement activity for kids, that they know that there's a purpose that they're putting all this down on paper. Who is their audience? Many of the things that you talked about in representation could also be used in expression, how you represent the material and how you ask the kids to express themselves. One of the things I thought about throughout this webinar was levels of language, and how, like when you talked about the watermelon view and the slice view and then the seeds view, you could look at different levels of language for each one of those and think about the needs of your students. You may have students that are at that watermelon level that need that, where you have other kids that are at the seeds level on the same topic. So you're giving them different ways to represent what they're seeing and different ways to write it back down for them. Using pictures. I think visual imagery is just so important as a way to represent what kids need to write. I was laughing when you were talking about the kids that look at a blank sheet of paper and say they don't know what to write. I've seen that so many times. And pictures are such a valuable way for them to get an idea and get going on it. The graffiti table. I thought that was great that they had, because I think about the students that I used to work with, and if they could see what people are writing down on that graffiti table, it gives them an idea. They may not use the same language level, they may not use the same grammar levels, but they're getting their thoughts on paper. The text features and being able to focus on different types of text. You guys had all these different genres and different types of text that you were asking kids to use, using photography and images. I love the story of Rachel where you talked about the young man that drew a picture as his writing, and then you went and built on that and used a graphic organizer to have him break that down a little bit more. Then you went to actually more of a formal writing type of process, which he learned to edit and then move back and forth on. And all of those are different levels and different ways to express and represent what you're asking your students to do. the modeling, the voice tagging, and the T-charts I thought were great ways to get vocabulary out for kids, both to help your kids that are needing to build their vocabulary up, and also for your students that are more advanced and need to go to more specific vocabulary. Going from the stuff and what stuff does, I thought was a great strategy for looking at not only how they see it, but how they can then write about it, using the different language levels. Doing peer conferencing, the way that you had that one example where you had the color coding for the peer conferencing and then a different color for the teacher conferencing was a great way for expression and also for representation. So there was a lot that was built into here that could be used for universal design for learning. So when you're looking at implementing those kinds of principles into your writing, think back to how, oh, this is another way I can represent, or this is another way that they can express. So great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dee Dee. We appreciate your input, and we thank all of our participants who have been watching and viewing, and for your comments. You all have been commended on what a great job Roberta and Rachel have done, and we appreciate both of them. Again, we thank all of you for joining this third session, Writing Genres. We also want to thank our presenters who have given their time and knowledge to this project. As you prepare to leave us, remember that the follow-up professional learning has a twofold purpose. One, to guide implementation back in your respective classrooms, and to provide consistent implementation across the state. Be sure to complete the survey that's located on GeorgiaStandards.Org. On that same webpage, you will find the recording for this session later today or tomorrow, along with the full or complete professional learning guide and previously recorded sessions. We look forward to seeing you on Twitter. Remember to use the hashtag Culture of Writing as well as @GodotELA. And it will be January the next time that we see you. We will not have a session in December, but please stay tuned for the next K-5 session where Roberta will be back with Writing Across the Curriculum. And we look forward to seeing you then. Until then, goodbye and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.